So I think the first thing that we really noticed in juvenile court after the pandemic began was an immediate drop in the number of children that we had being brought to detention. Um, so that was an indication that officers were finding ways to deal with juveniles that were apprehended in the field that didn't involve putting them in a patrol car and bringing them to our detention center. A year ago, on a normal week, we probably had 15 to 20 new children coming into detention during the week and doing detention hearings for them. Now, a normal week is probably more like 5 or 6. So that's an indication that officers are finding other ways to deal with those children, whether it's taking them to shelter care, contacting DCS to get DCS involved, contacting a family member to come pick the child up and take the child home, finding some other safe place for the child to go, or issuing a citation to the child as opposed to taking them into custody. There's another side of that coin, though, and that is that the children that do come to detention tend to come in on violent offenses or because they're carrying a weapon of some kind. And so those are cases that require a little more effort to get those cases together, put all the pieces together to have them ready to prosecute. And when a child is detention, our timelines for doing that are much shorter. So we find ourselves working a lot harder on those cases to make sure we've got all the pieces to the puzzle ready to go within the time limits that are required by the court. From a procedural perspective, we find ourselves using a lot more technology to do court and to make court appearances these days. We were fortunate in juvenile court that we were already using that technology to a certain degree before the pandemic started for things like administrative reviews and checking in with kids who were in DCS placements at places outside of Knox County. So it wasn't starting from ground zero for us, but I would say that we've become much more proficient in the last year at using video conferencing platforms like Zoom, for example, to conduct status hearings and probation reviews, and to a limited extent, even matters that require the taking of testimony. It's kind of an odd feeling to be a litigator who does what is expected of me in my job without actually having to physically go into the courtroom. And so I miss being in the courtroom. I miss the personal interaction with the judge and court staff, defense lawyers, probation staff, and other people that we work with on a regular basis. It's a different way of doing our job. And that's another thing that's been kind of unusual in the last year. There's a fairly small group of attorneys that do work in juvenile court. And so a year ago, it wasn't unusual as we moved from our office to the courtroom. Going through the lobby, we would see other attorneys. We'd see police officers that were waiting to be called into court, people who work with various service providers in DCS. And it was nice to be able to stop and just catch up with people. What did they do over the weekend? How are things going with their family? And so I really miss that part of the interaction that we were used to having over here at juvenile court. I look forward to the day coming that we'll be able to get back to more normal interactions in our work and our court appearances. And so from a personal standpoint, I would say that's probably the most significant impact I've felt in the last year, is just the loss of personal contact, not only with people at work, but with friends and family. You know, a year ago, it wasn't unusual that we would get together with family, get together with friends just on very short notice. And for the last year, to do that has either required a lot of planning or it's been impossible. And so it's helped me to greater appreciate the opportunities that we have to spend face-to-face time with friends and family.